The point of view shown here is where the counter-sniper team was stationed locally. The gold arrow highlights the location from which the shooter fired. The question arises, why was the assailant not detected when we were informed that the building was supposed to be monitored? Yesterday, the acting head of the U.S. Secret Service testified before Congress, seemingly attributing the failure to cover the building's roof, used by the gunman to shoot former President Donald Trump, to the local snipers. This testimony has faced criticism from some local officials. Republican Texas Congressman Pat Fallon will join us shortly to discuss the issue. But first, let's go to who is live in Butler, Pennsylvania. At the shooting site, CB, we have just received new video footage of the incident captured by a witness. Hi, Sandra. That's correct. This unsettling new video appears to show, take a look, a shadowy figure moving on the roof across from the stage where former President Donald Trump was speaking on July 13th. According to the FBI, would-be assassin Thomas Matthew Crooks traversed roofs about 150 yards away from the rally stage, so it is possible that this shadowy figure in the video is Crooks. In addition, we are aware of communication failures that occurred during the rally. Congressional testimony from Secret Service Acting Director Ronald Rowe indicates that there were failures in communication, particularly regarding the assumption that local officers would cover the roof used by the gunman. However, local officials have stated that this assumption does not match the actual assignment they received. The Secret Service indicated that coverage was expected from a window in one location, but local officials were assigned to a different area, as shown in their view of the site. Local officials emphasized that their role was to secure the perimeter from the outside and monitor those who had already passed through security. They pointed out that the view their two snipers had was different from what the Secret Service had described. The warehouse window mentioned by Acting Director Rowe on Capitol Hill is located at ground level, facing the crowd rather than the roof. The leaders of the local snipers have stated that they would have positioned their snipers on the roof if the Secret Service had given them that instruction. Acting Director Rowe has taken responsibility for the situation and assured that the Secret Service will improve communication with local law enforcement partners moving forward. We reached out to the Secret Service regarding feedback from local officials in Butler, Pennsylvania, but they referred us to Acting Director Rowe's testimony. John, let's bring in Republican Texas Congressman Pat Fallon, who is part of the bipartisan task force investigating the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Congressman, thank you for joining us. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but I'd like to replay the video that CB Cotton just showed. The video appears to be from a vantage point similar to where the president was on the platform. Although it is zoomed in, making everything appear closer, you can see someone on the roof. However, we were informed by the Secret Service acting director yesterday that the sniper teams could not see him due to being obscured by the peak of the roof. This video seems to significantly challenge that explanation. Well, John, seeing that video is chilling. It almost feels like looking at the Texas Book Depository building in November 1963. Fortunately, this situation ended differently, although it was still devastating for the families involved. What we need now are more trained personnel to guard presidential candidates and other high-profile individuals protected by the Secret Service. We also need improved planning, coordination, communication, and the use of technology, including anti-drone measures. Technology might have prevented this incident. For starters, President Trump and other protected individuals should have a counter-surveillance team and counter-assault teams on the ground. This was not the case in Butler on the 13th. We need a thorough investigation, examining every detail to understand what happened in Butler. As new videos emerge, it's notable to see even small details, such as a head appearing on the roof. Regarding drones, we learned from Acting Secret Service Director Rod Rowe that local police offered to use a drone for event surveillance, but the Secret Service declined the offer. Honestly, I'm baffled. The number of security lapses is perplexing. Why not accept the locals' offer to fly a drone? Why wasn't the AGR building secured, given that it was identified as the top threat after securing the immediate surrounding buildings around the president? I even recreated that scenario in Texas. In Butler, I had 15 out of 16 kill shots, so it's truly a miracle that President Trump is still alive today. We must ensure that this never happens again and figure out both how and why it occurred to prevent a repeat. For those at home, it might seem closer than it actually is. Zooming in compresses the video, blending the foreground and background, making the building appear nearer than it really is. Regarding the current situation, Congressman, with the Secret Service's ability to protect both former President Trump and Vice President Harris, who also travels on the campaign trail, a U.S. countersniper is raising serious concerns about the Secret Service's performance. The analysis suggests that another assassination attempt is highly probable. An email obtained by Real Clear Politics, dated Monday, indicates that the agency needs to make significant changes. The question is, if not now, then when? It is suggested that we should expect another attempt within the next 30 days, possibly before November. The current situation highlights our failure to protect our leaders, which is attributed to deficiencies in leadership. The whistleblower is calling for a complete overhaul of the current system. It is emphasized that preventing such incidents is always preferable to reacting after they occur. Prevention is inherently safer. The analysis notes that a 20-year-old untrained loner with only a week's notice was able to outsmart and outmaneuver the entire United States Secret Service. This situation raises concerns about potential copycat attacks. Moreover, if the threat had come from a nation-state with trained assassins, the outcome could have been significantly more severe. Immediate reforms are essential, and security measures must be strengthened. With 8,000 employees and a budget exceeding $3 billion, the Secret Service is well-resourced, but an internal review is urgently needed to address these concerns. Additionally, Congress should mandate an independent investigation to ensure a thorough examination. Agencies can sometimes adopt a cover-your-backside mentality, making it crucial to reassess and change leadership, as those responsible for the current situation are unlikely to resolve it. Historically, presidential assassinations and attempts, going back to Lincoln, have often been carried out by lone individuals who managed to bypass security. We anticipate the report from the bipartisan task force, expected in December, and encourage ongoing updates on its progress. For more updates, subscribe to the YouTube page to stay informed with our latest interviews and in-depth analysis. The 20-year-old man who attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump first drew law enforcement's attention at Saturday's rally when spectators noticed his unusual behavior outside the event. This tip led to a frantic search, but officers were unable to locate him before he climbed onto a roof and opened fire. Following the shooting, which resulted in the death of one spectator, investigators are searching for clues to understand what motivated Thomas Matthew Crooks from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, to commit this shocking act. The FBI is treating the incident as a potential act of domestic terrorism. However, the lack of a clear ideological motive from the man who was shot dead by the Secret Service has fueled various conspiracy theories. President Joe Biden urged everyone not to make assumptions about the individual's motives or affiliations. Speaking from the White House on Sunday, he emphasized, "Let the FBI and their partner agencies conduct their investigation. I have instructed that the investigation be both thorough and swift." The FBI has stated that it believes Crooks, who had bomb-making materials in the car he drove to the rally, acted alone. Investigators have not discovered any threatening comments on social media or any ideological motives that might explain why he targeted Trump. This occurred before the Secret Service quickly removed the presumptive Republican presidential nominee from the stage, with his face covered in blood. Trump reported on social media that the upper part of his right ear was injured in the shooting. However, his advisors mentioned that he was in great spirits as he prepared to arrive in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention on Sunday. Meanwhile, 2 spectators were critically injured, and Corey Comparator, a former local fire chief, was killed. Pennsylvania's governor stated that Comparator 50 died a hero after diving onto his family to shield them from harm. Relatives of Crooks have not responded to multiple messages from the Associated Press. His father, Matthew Crooks, informed CNN late Saturday that he was trying to understand the situation but would not comment on his son until he had spoken with law enforcement. An FBI official confirmed that Crooks' family is cooperating with the investigation. Several attendees at the rally reported to local officers that Crooks was behaving suspiciously and pacing near the magnetometers. This information was provided by a law enforcement official who spoke anonymously due to their lack of authorization to discuss the investigation. The officers were subsequently informed that Crooks was seen climbing a ladder. Despite their search efforts, they were unable to locate him before he reached the roof. Butler County Sheriff Michael Sloop informed the AP that a local officer ascended to the roof and came across Crooks. When Crooks saw the officer, he turned towards him just before the officer managed to drop down to safety. According to Sloop, the officer was unable to use his own firearm under those conditions. The officer then retreated down the ladder, while Crooks quickly fired a shot toward Trump. Secret Service snipers subsequently took action and shot Crooks, as reported by two officials who spoke to the TU, on condition of anonymity due to the ongoing investigation. A gunman opened fire from a rooftop during a Donald Trump rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. The shooter, armed with an AR-style rifle, targeted the event, resulting in Trump being injured and the alleged attacker being killed. Authorities are currently investigating how the gunman was able to get so close to the rally. This is not the first attempt on the life of a U.S. president, particularly in this case, a former president who might return to the White House in November. But it is the first to occur on live television and in the era of social media. The most recent assassination attempt before this was the shooting of Ronald Reagan in 1981. Over the past 4 decades, nearly all political institutions have experienced a decline in legitimacy by almost every measure. Even in the weeks leading up to this event, U.S. politics had already entered what could be described as crisis territory. Joe Biden's poor debate performance had plunged the Democratic Party into a state of alarm, with increasing calls for him to withdraw from the race to avoid an easy victory for Trump in November. Liberal political strategists were labeling Biden's debate fallout as a DEFCON 1 situation, a term that denotes the highest level of alert typically reserved for imminent threats or wartime conditions. It appears that their warnings about being at DEFCON 1 came a bit early. Last night, the internet was inundated with shocking footage showing a bullet grazing Trump's ear during his speech. Meanwhile, multiple shots were fired, resulting in at least 1 death and 2 injuries among the audience, causing the crowd to erupt in screams of terror. After Secret Service agents shot and killed the gunman, who had fired from the roof of a manufacturing plant roughly 300 feet away from the rally, they quickly moved to protect Trump. Despite the urgency, Trump seized the opportunity for a dramatic photo op. Recognizing the potential political benefit for his campaign, he defiantly raised his fist to the crowd, with blood streaming down his face, and shouted, "Fight!" multiple times before being escorted off the stage by his security team. So far, there has been limited information released about the sniper, Thomas Matthew Crooks, or his motivations. State voter records show that he was registered as a Republican. Crooks resided in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, approximately an hour from the rally location. He graduated from high school in 2022 and was employed in a nursing home kitchen. Notably, when he was 17, Crooks made a $15 donation to Act Blue, a campaign organization that supports liberal Democrats. This donation was made on January 20, 2021, the day of President Biden's inauguration. His former high school classmates characterized him as a loner who often wore hunting outfits to school. On the day of the shooting, he wore a T-shirt from Demolition Ranch, a well-known YouTube channel focused on guns and explosives. Police discovered bomb-making materials both in his home and in his car, which was parked outside the rally. Although the investigation is still ongoing, the FBI currently believes he acted alone. His erratic gunfire into the crowd suggests a lack of professional sniper training, and he had no known military connections. Regardless of the shooter's motives, it is important to note that communists oppose individual acts of terrorism. This opposition is not based on moral or pacifist principles, but rather because such acts are counterproductive to the class struggle and hinder the development of proletarian class consciousness. Trump's supporters were already convinced that the 2020 election had been stolen from their candidate and that all ruling institutions, including the media and the legal system, were conspiring against him. This sense of siege mentality has now intensified dramatically, amplifying their fears and anger exponentially. As a result, millions of Trump voters have been propelled into a heightened state of panic and rage. Almost immediately, the Trump apparatus started blaming the radical left for the attack. This rhetoric is a classic example of demagoguery and could increase the chances of more frequent violent attacks from the right wing. A comment from a Trump-supporting bystander illustrates the prevailing sentiment among much of his base. They fired first. This means fucking war. It's easy to envision the reaction from Trump's supporters if the sniper's bullet had found its mark. Such an event would likely have sparked a violent social upheaval, with rioting and aggressive actions directed at anyone seen as opposing their side. Communists inherently oppose Donald Trump, but it's evident that any outcome from an assassination attempt would only exacerbate existing divisions. Instead of clarifying the class conflicts within society, including those within Trump's own base, it would lead to a reactionary escalation, deepening the polarization without providing any resolution or understanding of the underlying issues. Most of Trump's support comes from workers who have been temporarily misled by his demagoguery. Our goal should be to clarify the class divisions within society and emphasize the interests of the entire working class. We need to demonstrate to workers that their real adversary is the capitalist class, not other segments of the working class. By doing this, we could potentially divide Trump's support base along class lines. This November, workers face the recurring choice between Democrats and Republicans. However, many are justifiably disillusioned with Trump, Biden, and other establishment politicians and institutions. This frustration reflects a deep-seated recognition that the political system serves a ruling class whose interests are fundamentally at odds with those of the working class. To overcome this political stalemate, the solution lies in the collective and conscious action of the working class, advancing its own interests. Achieving this requires a high level of class consciousness, and our role as communists is to facilitate this development. Acts of individual terror inherently undermine the process of collective empowerment. They shift the working class to a position of helpless spectators rather than fostering a sense of strength and confidence in their collective ability to influence events, as mass strikes or large demonstrations would. Individual acts of terror also generate fear and panic rather than encouraging a proactive stance towards mass struggle. Such incidents, like assassination attempts, are more likely to incite fringe militia groups and extremist vigilantes than to inspire workers to unite and challenge the ruling class. Another reactionary political effect of individual acts of terror is that they often frame specific politicians as the central issue. This perspective suggests that simply removing figures like Trump, Biden, Harris, Rubio, or Vance would be a significant improvement. However, this view is misguided as it distracts from the broader issue. The capitalist system itself, along with the parties and institutions of the ruling class, is the root cause of widespread oppression and discontent among the masses. The working class must recognize itself as a unified group with shared interests that are opposed to the array of capitalist politicians, including figures like Biden and Trump. Only by doing so can the class struggle progress towards the establishment of a workers' government. This is seen as the only viable solution to the myriad problems faced by millions of people. To counter the reactionary trend of Trumpism, it is crucial to persuade the working class supporters of Trump that their genuine class instincts are being exploited by someone with self-serving interests from the ruling class. During Trump's first term, the wealthiest 1% thrived, and the promised draining of the swamp did not materialize. If Trump returns to the Oval Office, he will not provide relief for the millions of workers who are facing unprecedented levels of hardship. The real adversary for American workers is the capitalist class within the United States, not immigrants or workers from other countries. The assassination attempt fails to lead to any immediate, actionable insights, and in fact, regresses public awareness. Instead of addressing the root issues, this event is likely to increase sympathy for Trump, boosting his support in the polls. It will also reinforce conspiracy theories that portray Trump as an anti-establishment figure, suggesting that hidden forces like the so-called deep state are trying to prevent him from becoming president. It is true that much of the ruling class opposes Trump primarily because he is an individualist focused on his own interests rather than the well-being of the system as a whole. They view Trump as a destabilizing force who has exacerbated political instability and further discredited the bourgeois institutions crucial for maintaining the system. Marx described the executive of the modern state as a committee for managing the common affairs of the entire bourgeoisie. While Biden may be seen as incoherent and ineffective, Trump is perceived as unpredictable, erratic, and self-serving, traits that are not desirable for the ruling class in a head of state. Unlike previous Republican candidates who received support from Fortune 100 company CEOs, Trump has not garnered backing from any of them, with the notable exception of Elon Musk, who endorsed him on X shortly after the shooting. This indicates that the Committee for Managing the Common Affairs of U.S. Capitalism is currently in disarray, with no signs of imminent stability in the coming years. Trump's supporters are now blaming the media and the so-called left for creating the conditions that led to this assassination attempt through their alarmist rhetoric. They argue that Biden, the Democrats, and the extensive media network that supports them have portrayed Trump as a fascist and suggested that his election would lead to a dictatorship, as if the establishment of a military police state were solely dependent on the intentions of one president. The liberal narrative of lesser evilism has depicted Trump as the embodiment of a threat to democracy, consistently dismissing his supporters as a reactionary group of deplorables. In contrast, Marxists argue that a substantial portion of Trump voters are workers with genuine class grievances, which have been distorted and exploited by the right due to the lack of a strong, combative class war alternative on the left. By failing to acknowledge this reality and indiscriminately labeling all Trump voters as fascist sympathizers, liberals and moderate leftists have pushed some workers further into Trump's camp. This has made it more challenging to shift their allegiance to a class-based perspective. Many workers who might have been receptive to discussions about union militancy and fighting for higher wages are now misled into believing they are facing an imminent conflict with the left. It's important to recognize that the issue isn't solely the fault of ruling class liberals. Former President Trump himself has openly endorsed political violence on several occasions. He has urged his supporters to knock the crap out of counter-protesters at his rallies, even promising to cover their legal expenses if they followed his advice. Trump also reacted aggressively to the mass protests in 2020, tweeting, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." This rhetoric not only inspired right-wing vigilantes to confront Black Lives Matter protests with arms, but also led to the deployment of unmarked federal law enforcement units for repression and abductions. Trump further inflamed tensions by celebrating the 2020 killing of an Antifa suspect in Portland. Now, the entire spectrum of the Washington establishment has come together in a unified stance to denounce political violence. In his public statement following the shooting, President Biden declared, "Look, there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. The idea that political violence like this exists in America is just unheard of. It's simply unacceptable. Everyone must condemn it." Many people are disturbed by the hypocrisy in current global conflicts. Violence is being endorsed in the war in Ukraine, where a recent attack on Russian civilians in Crimea was carried out using U.S. weapons. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Ukrainian workers have lost their lives in the trenches, fighting what is seen as a proxy war for U.S. imperialism against Russia. At the same time, President Biden embraces Netanyahu and provides weapons and ammunition, contributing to the killing of innocent Palestinians. The death toll among Palestinians could now be as high as 186,000. Following a failed assassination attempt, former President Donald Trump called for unity and resilience on Sunday. The attack, which left him wounded but reportedly fine, also resulted in the death of the gunman and a rally attendee. Trump, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, disclosed that the shooting pierced the upper part of his right ear. Despite the traumatic event, his aides reported that he was in great spirits and recovering well. In a post on his social media site, Trump described the incident. "I immediately knew something was wrong when I heard a whizzing sound, followed by gunshots, and then felt the bullet tearing through my skin. There was significant bleeding." In a follow-up post on Sunday, Trump stated, "It was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening." He emphasized the importance of unity and displaying our true character as Americans, urging everyone to remain strong and resolute in the face of evil and not to let it prevail. The FBI identified the shooter early Sunday as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, and continued its investigation. An FBI official noted that a motive had not yet been established. Secret Service agents fatally shot Crooks after he launched an attack from an elevated position outside the rally venue at a farm show in Butler, according to the agency. One attendee was killed and 2 others were critically injured, all of whom were men. Law enforcement officials revealed to the Associated Press that bomb-making materials were discovered both in the suspect's vehicle and at his home. These officials, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to release details publicly, provided this information to the AP. Investigators believe that the weapon used by Crooks was purchased by his father at least 6 months prior, according to law enforcement officials. Federal agents are still trying to determine when and how Crooks acquired the gun and are working to gather more information about him. Crooks' political affiliations are not immediately clear. Records indicate that he was registered as a Republican voter in Pennsylvania. However, federal campaign finance reports reveal that he contributed $15 to a progressive political action committee on January 20, 2021, the day President Joe Biden was inaugurated. Authorities informed reporters that Crooks was found without identification, so they are using DNA and other methods to verify his identity. Law enforcement officials recovered an AR-style rifle at the scene, according to an anonymous source familiar with the investigation. This incident marks the most serious assassination attempt on a president or presidential candidate since Ronald Reagan was shot in 1981. It has renewed concerns about political violence in the deeply polarized U.S., coming less than 4 months before the presidential election. This event may influence the atmosphere and security measures at the Republican National Convention, which starts Monday in Milwaukee. Organizers announced that the convention would continue as scheduled. After visiting a local hospital in Pennsylvania, Trump flew to New Jersey, landing at Newark Liberty International Airport shortly after midnight. A video shared by an aide showed the former president disembarking from his private jet, accompanied by Secret Service agents and heavily armed members of the agency's counter-assault team. This display of security was notably more visible than usual.